Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Real Talk on 92.5 WLSD The Vault on Friday, February 14th, 2025. And I'm not sure if you will remember this exact music, but this is from a movie called 12 Monkeys. And this is the movie that we're going to be diving in tonight. Before we get into that, please go to all the social media pages. That's the Facebook, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, The Other People's Show. And it's going to be a lot of fun. We've started a Patreon as well, so there's going to be some unreleased or Patreon-only shows, unreleased clips, some things that aren't generally released to the public, or there's going to be shows that are going to be posted on there earlier, so you will have early access to all that. Just go to the patreon.com/theotherpeopleshow. But tonight we're going to be diving into the 1996 Bruce Willis, Brad Pitt, Madeleine Stowe movie, 12 Monkeys. In a future world devastated by disease, a convict sent back in time to gather information about the man-made virus that wiped out most of human population on the planet. So this is basically about kind of a sci-fi time-traveling film in a way. Now this was directed by Terry Gilliam, and he is most associated with the Monty Python series. He was the director of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, The Fisher King with Robin Williams, and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas with Benicio del Toro and Johnny Depp. And this was a film that he did not write, but he wanted to be a part of this movie. And I think the movie and everyone involved in the movie thanked him, as they should have, because this is a very different kind of movie than Bruce Willis was used to being in at that time. And we'll get into that a little bit during the show as well. But you've got Bruce Willis as James Cole. You've got Madeleine Stowe as Catherine Riley. Brad Pitt as Jeffrey Goins. And Christopher Plummer as Dr. Leland Goins, which is Jeffrey's dad in the film. You've also got another actor. His name just went out of my mind. He's often sleazy in films, and I don't want to say he was sleazy in this movie, but he made you want to punch him in the face, which I was actually told earlier today. I wish I could punch you in the face. So me and that character, I guess, had a lot in common. And this was a film that, the budget was, considering the talent involved at the time, you would imagine that the budget would be a little bit higher. Not that it was a low budget, but this was a film that was... They were very unsure if this was going to be a movie that would reach a mass audience, because it's a little bit darker in tone. It's a different kind of role than what Bruce Willis was used to being in at the time as well. And this was, you have to think of this was before really Brad Pitt really broke out into his own, if you think about it. Because this was 1996 is when it was released. It came out it was filmed in 1995. And around 1995 is when Brad Pitt was first starting to be really, really recognized, like his breakthrough, I guess you could say. And this was one of the movies that kind of broke him through, because he was nominated for a Best Supporting Actor trophy for this movie, for this role. And I don't know if a lot of people outside the cinema world really realized that this was, early on, it was his breakthrough. 94 through 98 was probably when you could say his breakthrough really, really occurred. But up until this point, there had not been that huge thing. He was in a movie called Cool World, which is kind of a cartoon movie meets real life, live action. Kind of like a darker Who Framed Roger Rabbit, I guess you could say. A River Runs Through It, he was in that. California, he had the small role in True Romance. Interview with a Vampire was kind of his big breakthrough. He was also shirtless, I guess, in Thelma and Louise, and I think that caught a lot of eyes as well. And then in 94, he had Interview with a Vampire, Legends of the Fall, In 1995, he had Seven, which is a breakout. And, to this day, I would say Seven is probably the best serial killer movie out there. I would put it up against anything else. I do think it's better than Silence of the Lambs. I do think it's better than Red Dragon. I do think it's better than Hannibal. I'm trying to think of some other, serial killer films, but I do think Seven is probably one of the best. Probably in my top 10 movies of all time. And then after these movies, 7, 12 Monkeys. Then he had the movie Sleepers, The Devil's Own with Harrison Ford, 7 Years in Tibet, Meet Joe Black, Fight Club, The Mexican. And then it just kind of goes on and on. So this was early on in his career. And Bruce Willis, although he had been in countless movies that Bruce Willis has been, one of the biggest actors of all time. He was in The Fifth Element, Armageddon, The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, The Whole Nine Yards, Sin City, Rooper, the Die Hard franchise, Moonlighting. I mean, the list just goes on and on. And, I've always had a soft spot in my heart for Bruce Willis, just due to the fact that, he came out at a very I came to know him at a very impressionable age of my life. And he, up until 2022, he was, a constant. Even his lesser fare like Hudson Hawk or Striking Distance. Some people say The Last Boy Scout was a flop, but it wasn't. Pulp Fiction as Butch. It goes on and on. But there's no other role in Bruce Willis's filmography that's quite like 12 Monkeys. This one stands out because although Bruce Willis has done sci-fi before, when he did the Fifth Element and things like that, and he's done action constantly, this was more of this was the Bruce Willis where I saw the sadness in his eyes. It was a really emotional character. James Cole, and he felt vulnerable in a way that I don't really ever see Bruce Willis be vulnerable on screen. And when up on the rewatch, I hadn't seen this movie in quite some time, to be honest with you. It had been, I don't know, to be honest. I think the last time I'd seen this movie was at least 10 years ago, and I had more appreciation for it this time. And I wished, I got to be honest, I wasn't able to give 100% concentration to the film. And that's my fault. I try not to do that. But, sometimes life does, you have to deal with life and things that are going on. So I wasn't really able to give this, I would love to give it a fourth or fifth watch. I bought this movie when it came out on VHS. And if you remember back in the VHS days, you can go into a lot of video stores, especially like a Blockbuster or a Movie Stars, and they would have many copies of the same movie. And after a couple weeks out, they would put them up for sale. Usually a 5 for 20, 5 for 25 kind of a deal, and 12 Monkeys was one of my purchases. Now, where it only came out on about, I think it came out around 1,200 theaters. It didn't really come to the region that I lived in. It didn't come around the Wise or Coburn or Norton area. And there was a snowstorm during that time of year. The Christmas season of 1995 into the blizzard of, it was, I don't know if it would be considered a blizzard, but I do know that I was unable to get to the Tri-Cities to catch this movie. So the first time that I did get to see it was on VHS. And it's I remember being, I don't want to say disappointed, but it was confused. It was a confusing movie. I was a teenager, and now looking back and revisiting, which I have I think 3 times since then, it's gotten better every single time, and this time was no exception. Now, here's a few facts of this movie. The shots where the wrong thing. Terry Gilliam was afraid that Brad Pitt wouldn't be able to pull off the nervous, rapid speech that his character has in the movie, so he sent him to a speech coach. But in the end, it just took, all he did was to get Brad Pitt's performance was to take Brad Pitt's cigarettes away. and he played the part exactly as Gilliam had wanted. Brad Pitt was a chronic chain smoker, and he was just like, all right, no more cigarettes. And that's going to help you enhance your performance. And, if you go in knowing the kind of character that Brad Pitt is in this movie, his performance is phenomenal. He does get a lot of these nervous tics and the rapid speech and slightly kooky, erratic person down to a T. And he does a fantastic job. Now, although it's never addressed directly in the movie, the script and some promotional material reveal that the future scenes that take place in this movie were 2035. So only 10 years from now. So it would have been, the movie takes place in between a couple different years. Now we learn that the future, which is the present in the movie, is around 2035. And then James Cole happens to go back to stop the virus or attempt to. And he goes back to 1996. And he goes also back to 1990 as well. Terry Gilliam's first choice for the lead role was James Cole, was Jeff Bridges, whom he had enjoyed working with on The Fisher King, which also starred Robin Williams. But the studio wanted a bigger star, so they cast Bruce Willis instead. Bruce Willis had originally auditioned for The Fisher King, but that movie went to Jeff Bridges. So that was kind of a flip-flop of movies, and this also, if you remember, when we discussed Die Hard, that the same kind of thing happened. Well, we discussed Lethal Weapon, and the same thing happened with Mel Gibson with Die Hard and Bruce Willis with Lethal Weapon. Originally, Bruce Willis was going for the part Martin Riggs in Lethal Weapon, and Mel Gibson was going for the part in Die Hard. So, once again, those roles switched, and we all know how those turned out. Both movies, fantastic action movies that do stand the test of time. And this one does too. So Brad Pitt's character, he wears a hand-painted contact lens to achieve his cockeyed look in the film. There's something off-putting continuously every time that Jeffrey is on screen, and partly due to his mannerisms, his tics, his rapid fire, like we just said, his kind of off-putting, off-kilter behavior, and one of his eyes, and it's not a lazy-eyed, but it's kind of a cockeyed eye, and it's very pronounced, and you can see it and tell it immediately, and it does add to his character, but that was a hand-painted contact lens. And also in the asylum, when Bruce Willis is sitting at the little table talking to Jeffrey, he is writing with his left hand. Bruce is pretty strict about being a lefty with his directors, even golfing left-handed in Armageddon. So if you've noticed over the years, Bruce Willis, when he fires a gun, when he punches, when he leads with his left foot to punch, he's a left-handed dude. And I noticed this as well during the film. It's pronounced like it always is. So that's always very cool to see that. Even though I'm not left-handed, I can do a couple things left-handed, but not others. This had a budget of $29 million, and like I said earlier, this was kind of I don't want to say a low budget, but this was a mid-range budget for a Bruce Willis movie. Because you have to think Bruce Willis just had come off of doing Pulp Fiction, and that was a huge movie, especially considering that Bruce Willis had kind of he'd had the resurrection with Pulp Fiction, but before Pulp Fiction he had several different movies that just didn't do very well at all, and those movies were Bonfire of the Vanities. He had, a lot of people thought Last Action Hero, not Last Action Hero, but the Last Boy Scout. They thought that was a disappointment. And I guess in relative to Die Hard's box office, and considering the talent that you had in the Last Boy Scout, it may have been considered a disappointment financially. It did turn a profit, but not as big as they had wanted. But the Last Boy Scout is a fantastic action comedy. and more of an action movie, but it's a really good movie. And I've probably seen that more times than any other Bruce Willis movie, to be honest. But right before this, he had Bonfire of the Vanities, Hudson Hawk, like I said, a lot of people said The Last Boy Scout, Striking Distance, Color of Night. So he was in North as the bunny. And, there was, this kind of resurrected Bruce Willis again after Pulp Fiction. This gave him a chance to work with Terry Gilliam. This gave him a chance to work with a young Brad Pitt. And this gave him a chance to work in a genre that he had not really dipped his toes in up to this point. And this has been, 30 years ago at this point. But, back then, this was a very different Bruce Willis, and we never really got to see another Bruce Willis featured in this movie. This movie was a hit movie, grossing $57.1 million in America and $184.1 worldwide. And the critics and audiences alike both seem to like it all across the board. 88% on Rotten Tomatoes, audience score of 88%, and an IMDb score of 8.0. So, the basic premise of this movie is that James Cole is this prisoner in 2035. And there's been a virus that's been released in the past, and it's killed off most of the population. I think there's 5 billion people that's been killed due to this virus. And they are selecting someone, and it seems that this has been something that they've been trying to do for a while. But they select James Cole to go back and try to retrieve any kind of life form that he can, or any information that he can about the army of the 12 monkeys, because they have a part of what's happened in the future. And the reason they select James is that he remembers things, and he has a fantastic memory, and that he's strong and solid, and he's going to be able to go back, because when you go back in time, it takes a lot out of you, and they state that a couple times in this movie as well. The problem is, when they send James Cole back the first time, they need to send him back to 1996. But they don't send him back there. They accidentally send him to 1990, and he meets, pretty much this doctor, Catherine Riley, I guess you could say, played by Madeline Stowe. And, at first, he's thrown, basically he's interviewed, what's going on, where did you get here? He has no social security number. He has no identification. Nothing at all. Because he's not born yet. Now, some of the logic, the timeline, going back thinking about it, it might not match up completely. But I'm sure if I sat down really and studied, it might. So let's just throw that to a side. If anyone out there wants to correct me in the timeline and things like that, I do apologize as well. But when he's sent back, he's automatically thought to be crazy. He's thought to be a lunatic, and he's thrown in the loony bin, the mental ward, where he meets Jeffrey Goins, played by Brad Pitt. And you can tell right away that Jeffrey is, all these things, that Jeffrey is probably where he needs to be. And if you're listening to what James Cole says, then he's probably where he needs to be. But he does have some information about the future, and he's trying to help humanity, is basically what he's sent to do. He ends up going back to the present day, and then he tells them, you sent me back to the wrong time, James tells the scientists. So they do send him back to the year 1996. And that's kind of when, I don't want to go into every time that he comes back and forth, because it's a couple different times. And each time you feel worse and worse for this character. And that's what I'm going to talk about a lot tonight, is the way that you sympathize with James. Because James, it never says exactly that I can recall why James is in prison to begin with in the future. He's violent. I think there's a time where they talk about some of his crimes, violence being one of them. But you get a sense of loss. You get a sense of alienation, isolation, sadness in Bruce Willis's characterization of James Cole. And, a lot of people don't think of Bruce Willis as, they don't think of him as a bad actor, but I don't think they really think of what a command that he actually had when he wasn't doing the action thing. Because there's a lot of times in the sadness in the most vulnerable that I've ever seen him outside of his diagnosis now was his the way he admits it on the screen in 12 Monkeys. And, this, you could say this is a time traveling kind of tale, and it is to a certain extent. But, more so than that, the basic story is he's sent back a couple times to try to bring something that can help stop this virus from taking out the world, is the basic premise. And I'm not going to give away the ending. This is the movie that I do not want to give away the ending if you've seen the movie. And there was a TV show of this. I've never seen the TV show. But if you've seen the movie, you'll probably remember the ending. But for those of you who haven't, I recommend going in blind. Don't be doing any other research other than the show. The characters, we'll get onto those characters. The three that I've mentioned, the main ones. We've got Bruce Willis as James Cole, Madeline Stowe as Dr. Catherine Riley, and Brad Pitt as Jeffrey Goins. And they all do a fantastic job. Madeline Stowe, now I don't know if a lot of people do remember her. She was, kind of had this little run in the early to mid 90s. I never did think that she was really, the breakout. I mean, she started in 1987 in Stakeout. She was in Revenge with Kevin Costner, Unlawful Entry with Kurt Russell. She was in Last of the Mohicans with Daniel Day-Lewis. Blink, she was in that. I think Blink was with Aidan Quinn. Aidan Quinn. So she was kind of, the go-to, one of the go-to women actresses. But she's for thrillers, it seems to be, the two Jakes. She seems to be in that. She was in The General's Daughter in 1999. And, she kind of seemed to, now looking at her filmography, to be honest with you, she stopped doing movies in 2003. She retired from doing movies in 2003. She did some television after that, and she's done some television since then. She was on the show Revenge from 2011 until 2015, it looks like, 89 episodes. But she probably, I don't know exactly, but she probably had a child. A lot of actresses take time off to help raise the child. When the child's a little bit older, they come back. So I think that's what happened with her. But she had a good little career going, working with some of the best actors and actresses in Hollywood. You've got Kevin Costner, Kurt Russell, the best actor probably of all time, or one of the many, Daniel Day-Lewis. She was in a movie called Shortcuts, which was a Robert Altman film, but it was like a, I guess you could say an ensemble, because it had people like Andy McDowell, Julianne Moore, Matthew Modine, Fred Ward, Chris Penn, Robert Downey Jr., Tim Robbins, Peter Gallagher. I'm trying to think who else. Huey Lewis was even in Robert Altman's Shortcuts. I've never seen it, but it did get good reviews at the time, and it helped put Robert Altman back onto the map after he fell out after the apparently disastrous rendition of, or not remake, but make of production of Popeye with Robin Williams, which I've actually never seen. But I say all that to say that she did a good job. Brad Pitt, he was actually, like I said, nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, and he does a fantastic job. And Bruce Willis does a very heartfelt performance, which you wouldn't think that in a movie about going back in time to save the world, basically. But it's very low key. It's very low key, and it's not what you'd expect if you haven't seen it or even really heard of it before, because it kind of gets, I don't think it gets mentioned that much in the cinematic landscape. Favorite scene or least favorite scene? I don't want to say that there's a least favorite scene because I don't really have one. There was a couple uncomfortable scenes in the movie. I always feel uneasy in movies when people are put into mental institutions and being held against their will. Especially if it's characters that they're thought to be crazy, but they're not. There's a Dudley Moore movie called, I think it's called something Crazy People with Daryl Hannah. And I saw that as a young lad. And he goes in. And he's not really crazy. But that's a comedy movie. But anyway, that... Excuse me. That was, something that I didn't really expect when I first watched this, because I was used to seeing Bruce Willis in Die Hard, in The Last Boy Scout, Die Hard 2, Hudson Hawk. These were the movies that I had seen early on, Striking Distance, Pulp Fiction, and then here comes 12 Monkeys. That's completely different, and it's different not only in it. Where the Fifth Element, which he did a couple of years later, was a fun, action-packed, goofy, enjoyable, space romp. This has nothing to do with space. And this, other than traveling back in time, it is a time-traveling movie, but you don't get that from it exactly because there's so many other different facets to it. And there's a facet now, looking back that, 5 billion people were wiped out in the movie. And to see, they go to Philadelphia, they go to Baltimore, to see, how they portray the future is heartbreaking. Very Blade Runner-ish, in a sense. Not with the technology, but the barren landscape and it's not a bright outlook at all. But there is a least favorite scene, I guess you could say. He's sent back to gather things, and you see like he gathers a bug, a couple of other little things, and then he's in the room with Jeffrey, and Jeffrey's going on this spiel about what his father does, I think, and then James Cole sees the spider running across the pillow. And I'm not really sure even now, while sitting here thinking back about that scene, I'm not really sure what the exact purpose of James Cole. He didn't really have anything to put the spider in, so he eats the spider. And I don't know if Bruce Willis actually did eat the real spider. I've not been able to confirm or deny that. I do know Nicolas Cage ate a cockroach in Vampire's Kiss. But I don't know if Bruce Willis ate the spider. But he does have a real spider in his hand. And I think that would have been one of the most difficult scenes for me to have filmed. That spider. That creepy spider. But that was a very uneasy scene. Him being restrained within the mental hospital is, that was hard to watch. And this is not an easy movie to watch. I watch a lot of movies that aren't easy. That doesn't make it not a good movie. It's a good movie. But it's just not always an easy movie to watch. And this is one of those kind of movies. One of my favorite scenes, I would say, is, there's a scene where he goes back in 1996. And he gets the doctor. He sees she's having a lecture. And he pretty much kidnaps her and takes her to, I think they go to Philadelphia is where they're going. And there's a scene where, she's very afraid because this is a guy who's beat up the orderlies in the past. She thinks he's delusional, thinking he's from the future, coming back, trying to stop this army of the 12 monkeys. So she thinks he's crazy, and he's kidnapped her. And has pretty much forced her. You're taking me to Philadelphia. I've got to find stuff there. And there's a part where, the windows roll down because you have to think where he's coming from the future in 2035. they live underground. I don't know if I've said that, but they're not out in the atmosphere. They're not living out in the world. They're living beneath the city because the virus has taken over that you can't go outside, which is really odd, after all the things that's happened the last couple of years. But there's a scene where James and the doctor are in the car and the windows roll down and he sticks his head out the window. And he's like, I just love smelling the air. And he's so happy. His head's out the window like a dog's head's out the window, just breathing in the air that he's not got to breathe in. He's never really experienced this since he was a kid. Now he's actually getting to breathe the air. And then he goes and she turns on the radio and he listens to some music that he likes and a song that he remembers. And that it's a very emotional moment. And you can see in James's sad face a little bit of life, a little bit of light. Because it does go from back and forth where James thinks, he's not crazy, to where later on he believes that he might actually be crazy. Because he doesn't know if any of this is happening. Because he's been, in the stays within the mental institution, they've sedated him time upon time again. So you really feel for him. And I did. And I know that you will too. The score of this movie, we listened to the theme. We started off the show with the theme of the movie. And I think it is a good theme. It's one that once you listen to it, it gets stuck in your head. And then you'll remember it right away, like years later. Yeah, I think it's very memorable. But there's something unsettling about it as well. And I think that's, kind of like this movie as well. It's kind of very unsettling, but you're very captivated with this and just can't take your eyes off. And I do think this movie has a good score. I hadn't really thought about this in the past when I've watched it, other than the main theme. But it's very subtle and very haunting in a way. It's very kind of sad. You've got these stringed instruments. And there's another little facet to the movie as well, is that throughout the movie, James has he thinks they're dreams. When you watch the film, I'm not going to give it away tonight here, you'll realize exactly what those dreams were and how they kind of fit back into how he became. Originality, I do think this movie is very original. I've not watched a lot of time traveling movies, I gotta be honest with you, but this is one that is very captivating. And I don't have it on VHS now. I had to rent it on a Fandango, but it was worth it. It was worth $4 watch rent. I might watch it again. But it did put me in a very somber mood, because I get affected by movies a lot, and I'm in music and emotions and things, and that's part of the reason to watch them. But this is an entertaining movie, but it's not an easy one. You need to pay attention, and you need to absorb everything that's going on screen. The poster. I do like the poster pretty well. I had some people say that there's some complaints about the poster. The main complaint being really is that there's a red little 12 monkeys symbol in Bruce Willis's right eye. And if you don't know what it is, you might think, is this another Terminator movie with Bruce Willis. I don't know why they decided to put it in his eye like that, because it's kind of, but it's a cool poster because it's got Bruce Willis's face. It's mainly black and gray, and the right side of Bruce Willis's face has that little 12 monkeys, the red emblem in his eye. You can't see his left eye, and it kind of, transforms into Madeline Stowe's character, and then Brad Pitt's characters in the background. And it's all black and gray. And I do think it's very effective. And I do think it's very intriguing. I had a lot of people click on the story today. And I know they clicked on the story just because they were wondering, is this another Terminator film? No, it isn't. It's 12 Monkeys. Would I or would I not recommend this movie? I would say I do recommend this movie. This is a movie that will catch you off guard. It's not going to be for everyone. If you're wanting a fast-paced action movie, this is not the movie for you. This is more of a low-key. It's about 2 hours. I think it's 2 hours and 10 minutes long. I think 8 of those minutes are credits. So it's about 2 hours and 2 minutes. And this is a very subdued, emotional performance from the lead star, Bruce Willis. And it is something that, I know in the grand scheme of his life, no one really cares. And I'm sure that he has no idea about this now, sadly. But this is a movie that I would look back on if I were participating in this and be proud of the performance that he did. I think everyone does a fantastic job. It takes you in places you might not expect. It's the ending is different than you would probably expect, and I'm really surprised that this was released as a major motion picture release in 1996. December limited release, and then it came wide release in January of 96, so it was technically released in December of 1995. So that was our movie tonight on Real Talk 12 Monkeys. Please go to all the social media pages. That is the Facebook, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, The Other People's Show. We will, I'll check on the list, because these are coming from a list of you all, the audience and the fans. Thank you very much. And we're going to try to get to as many as you all suggest, as many movies as you all do suggest. So keep suggesting those. So stay tuned for another edition of The Other People's Show in just a moment.